everybody, this is Ohio Cowgirl. What does an AIP Paleo garden look like? If you have a garden and you're a woman homesteader or just someone who enjoys gardening and follows an anti-inflammatory diet such as the AIP diet or the Paleo diet or a combination of the two, what would you grow in your garden and what should you not grow? Well, that's what I want to take you through my garden today to explain. Because the AIP and Paleo diets, I feel like, are becoming more common for people with chronic conditions. And for those of you who don't know, I'm also a dietitian, and I counsel quite a few clients with chronic conditions that want some recommendations for foods that they can take out of their diet that could be inflammatory. So what I thought it would be fun to do is just walk you through my garden, show you what I grow. As a single woman homesteader, I'm always thinking of time efficiency, which crops are easier to grow, which take more time, and I choose the ones that are more self-sufficient and that don't take quite as much maintenance but yield great results. And yield of volume is actually, or volume of yield, I'm sorry, is another huge factor. I definitely want crops that I don't have to plant a ton of, that will still yield great results. So come on along and we'll take a look. All right, so we are going to start here at the end of the garden. As you can see, we'll look down the whole length. I have 6 raised beds. Each bed is 4 feet by 8 feet and about 12 inches in depth. And I started this garden when we moved to this farm almost 2 years ago now. And what I did for my soil in the beds is that I used 50% topsoil and 50% compost. We do raise chickens. Here's our chicken coop over here. And so we have a little laying flock. We do have a rooster there as well. And we use the chicken manure as in our compost, of course. And then across the pond, you can barely see the red barn over there. We have a horse as well. And horse manure is where most of my compost comes from. So that's what I started these beds with last year. This year, I added another layer of compost into the soil before I planted in the spring. And I mean, as you can see, it's doing amazingly well. It's definitely flourishing. I don't actually have 100% of the beds planted. I'd say 90% probably, 85 to 90%. But I try to not only garden organically, but I really work on amending my soil and getting it as rich as possible, and then not using any fertilizers or any pest control methods at all, save for, you can see out there, I've got right there, the row cover on top of the greens. And that is a great form of pest control. That's a physical barrier so that you don't have to spray your plants with anything. Okay, so let's talk about the AIP and Paleo diet. So this diet is a way for people with chronic conditions, which I am one of those, to really use their diet to lower inflammation in the body and provide a high level of vitamins and minerals and other nutrients that your body needs to function well. So to that end, lots of fruits and vegetables are included. One of those is berries. I've got an enormous blackberry bush here. I just put this in last year and it has gone crazy, as you can see. I'm trying to get all of it in the video here for you. It's huge. So blackberries, strawberries, blueberries, any kind of berries are a great source of antioxidants, which will help to lower inflammation. You can see down here, I'll show you this close up. These guys are getting so nice and ripe. Another few weeks and they should be ready to harvest. They're still very tart. We tasted them yesterday. They're not ready yet. And then I do have a strawberry patch right here. Strawberries, again, another great source of antioxidants, and they are included in both the Paleo and the AIP diet. And I should clarify, I didn't explain what AIP stands for. It's definitely becoming more common now, but it stands for Anti-Inflammatory Protocol Diet. And it's an elimination diet for anybody who has an autoimmune condition or a chronic inflammatory condition, really, which could include diabetes, heart disease, other conditions like that. And you basically want to reduce any sources of inflammation from your diet and focus on anti-inflammatory foods. So that's why there are certain restrictions. I will go over, after we go over everything that I have planted in my garden, I'll talk to you about what fruits and vegetables you might not want to eat, particularly on the AIP diet. But as you can see here, this doesn't look like much now, but this is the asparagus patch. There's a really tall stalk right here, tall and skinny. We have been harvesting asparagus since the spring, and we still have some more shoots coming up here that I'll be harvesting. We just harvest them as they come up. Like I said, it doesn't look like a whole lot now. These plants are only 2 years old, and I learned from planting asparagus in my first time a few years ago that for the first 2 to 3 years, you're not supposed to harvest much. You're supposed to let a lot of the plant grow to get stronger and better established. So you can see these tall, spindly green stalks. Those are left there on purpose. I'm just letting them grow and, get the plant healthier so that it will be even stronger for next year. So that's asparagus. In this bed, this one's in transition. We have peas, which are a cool season vegetable, and it's now mid-July. So as you can tell, they're looking brown, tired. I've pulled some up already. We had a full bed of sweet peas in the spring, but at this point they're kind of done for the summer. I've still got some here that I'll harvest, and we've gotten quite a lot from them, so that's been fun. But I'll be pulling those up in the next few weeks. And then I have spinach here, and this spinach was planted in the spring. It has now bolted, but I've just planted some more spinach. So I like to do spinach, lettuce, and kale year round, and I've got some tiny little seedlings just coming up, and we will have a new crop of spinach in a few weeks. And as most of you probably know by now, spinach, kale, dark green lettuce, collard greens, turnip greens, all of those greens are really, really great sources of antioxidants. So anyone on the AIP or Paleo diet, that's a great choice to include in your diet. I eat 1 to 2 large salads with like 2 to 3 cups of those greens every day as 1 or 2 of my meals. And they're filling, full of fiber, and full of vitamins as well. So in addition to the peas and spinach in this bed, I also have beets. That is one lone beet that I just couldn't bear to pull up, so I let him grow there. But over here on this side, we've got a bunch of beets. And beet greens also are very, very high in vitamins, and they're a great thing to add to your salads. You can also saute them with a little garlic and onion, just like you would do spinach, and they're really delicious. Unfortunately, and this is something anybody who follows the anti-inflammatory diet learns at one point or another, you will come across certain foods that your body does great with and certain foods that it doesn't. I cannot tolerate beet greens. I don't know what it is in them, but it makes my mouth and my throat feel really strange. So I cannot eat them, but they don't go to waste. We give them to our chickens. And again, great source of vitamins and minerals, and the chickens love them. So I just harvest the beets, snap off the beet at the bottom, and then we feed the greens to the chickens. So that's our beet patch. Let me come down here and show you we have onions. AIP and Paleo diets include a lot of garlic and onions. If you like those foods, they're very high in certain compounds that other foods don't have. So they're a really, really great choice. The only reason I would say to avoid garlic and onions is if you are on a low FODMAP diet for SIBO or for IBS, then you would not probably want to be planting them in your garden. Thankfully, I tolerate them fine. I love them. And so I've got several rows planted here. I actually have 5 rows planted. You can really only see 3. And that's because the zucchini is totally taking over. So here's our zucchini patch. It looks like a jungle because it is. I kind of plant too many on purpose. One thing about gardening, particularly in raised beds with really rich soil, is that you can plant in a higher capacity than the seed package tells you. So what I generally do is I go by the spacing. So I think these said maybe 18 inches apart. So I did that, but I would plant 2 seeds 6 inches apart, and then every 18 inches, if that makes sense. So I actually planted twice as many plants as the package recommended. But if you have rich soil and you water adequately, they do fine, and you get twice the yield. So as you can see here, we have already harvested a ton of zucchini, and I just saw one. Where did he go? There's a tiny little guy, but we have been harvesting so many zucchini from these plants. They're doing great. I'm very happy they have not been attacked by powdery mildew yet. It will probably happen later in the summer, but they're just doing so well. And I just love knowing that our soil is so healthy. I'm not spraying them with anything. You can literally pick anything in our garden and just eat it. I mean, there's nothing on it other than rainwater or hose water. And I actually do water frequently, especially when I plant seeds and I have to water them every day till they come up. I use our pond water. And the reason that I do that is, one, it's free water. I don't have to get it from the hose. But the other reason is that the one organic fertilizer that I do occasionally use if something's really looking puny and needs some help is I will use fish fertilizer. It's purely organic. There's nothing manufactured in it at all. It's just literally fish parts ground up into a fertilizer. Very, very high in nutrients. Great source, great fertilizer for plants. But it's expensive, as all fertilizers are, organic or not. And so most of the time, I just walk right over here to our pond, I fill up a bucket and the watering can, and I come back over and water. And so you could consider that a fertilizer, I suppose. I think that it adds nutrients to the soil, and everything's doing really well. So I think it's working pretty well. This end of the bed, you can see these plants with the little white blossoms. These are green beans. And we are not harvesting them yet, but let me see. Here's a little picture of these tiny little guys. But they will be ready to harvest. They grow actually really fast once the beans form. They grow pretty quickly. So, oh, and I see we have a problem here. Japanese beetles. Oh, there we go. We've got some that are a little bit bigger there. But Japanese beetles are definitely a problem to many plants, and I may end up covering these plants with row cover as well, just to keep the beetles off of them. They just put a bunch of holes in the leaves, and they can eventually kill a plant if they, attack it too much. So hopefully, maybe if I cover these guys, we won't have so much of a problem. But that's the green beans. That is definitely included on the AIP diet, as is zucchini and yellow squash, if you like that. And this patch I'm excited about. This is butternut squash, which I've never grown before. I like to try something new every year. I don't always do it, but I love to whenever I come across something that looks like fun. And right down here, we've got some butternut squash growing. There's another one. And there's one. So I'm really, really excited about these guys. I love butternut squash. They're kind of a staple of my diet. I eat them a lot. And something just to know about squash and carbs and the paleo or AIP diet. If you follow a lower carb diet, which I do because I feel better, I have fewer GI symptoms and my energy levels just seem to stay more steady if I eat fewer carbs. Butternut squash is quite a bit lower in carbs than sweet potatoes. So, they're somewhat interchangeable in flavor and texture and the recipes you would use them in, but butternut squash does have fewer carbs. So I tend to eat that more often than sweet potatoes, although I love sweet potatoes, and I actually have planted some, again, for the first time. This is another first for me. I've grown red potatoes before, but I've never done sweet potatoes. So this is my tiny little sweet potato patch. And there's kale growing in here too, so they're kind of mixed up. But the plant right there in the middle is a sweet potato vine, and that one as well. And they're actually doing really well. There's a whole process to getting sweet potato plants from a slip, and then, getting the slip, from like the seed potato. And then you have to root it, and then you can transplant it to your garden. So that's the stage they're at. They've just been planted about a week ago. I'm a little behind on the schedule. I didn't realize it would take so long to create the slips and then root them, but that's okay. So far they look healthy, they're alive, so I'm happy with that. So I'm doing both sweet potatoes and butternut squash. Red potatoes and white potatoes are not included on the AIP diet because they're a member of the nightshade family. And the nightshade family of vegetables includes potatoes, okra, eggplant, tomatoes, and peppers. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. And okra. I don't think I said okra. So all of those vegetables, tomato technically being a fruit, but they all have a certain family of compounds that can cause inflammation in some people. But sweet potatoes are actually not a true potato. They're in a different family. So sweet potatoes are okay, and then butternut squash is okay. So we've seen those. The very last thing I want to show you is, let me move my row cover off here. This is my bed of greens. And it is a mixture of kale, lettuce, and sometimes I grow spinach in this bed. But I'm actually, as you can see, I have about 1 million kale plants in here. And so I'm just restricting it right now to kale and lettuce. I will have a bunch to give away to friends and also sell at the farmer's market that we sell at monthly. So all of these crazy little seedlings came from 2 patches of kale that I had in this bed that actually just came up on their own this spring. They had survived all winter and they just came up and grew into mammoth size, and then they seeded out. And I had never before seeded out any type of greens. I'd always just pulled them all, or pick them as they came up. But it was so cool. We ended up with a bunch of kale seeds for new plants, which is great. So I have some actually in the garage drying, and we are going to thresh and winnow those so that we can save those seeds and replant them next year. But for right now, I've got my next planting ready for the summer. So it's really great. And here's Lightning, our barn cat. He wanted to come and say hi as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video and have gotten some good ideas for what you can plant in your garden if you follow the AIP or Paleo diet. If you have any questions about the diets or how to grow a certain plant or have any comments, please leave them below. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you'll have a great day.